the recording. It's one thing I learned on City Commission.
Quit popping those things right up against the mic.
Well, and just to open them before they start recording, and then or.
With the long meeting, you open 2 or 3 times.
No, there's usually a break, and that's when I.
At least this week we get to see the exhibits. Last week
How much,
they wouldn't come up.
how much growth they do, and how much cognitive development, how fast they cognitive development, and how aware
I mean,
they
that took a
are
lot of
of things
effort.
at such a young age. That's what really blew me away, of how smart they were, and how perceptive, and
Now it's just
Dirt that's been shaped and
solidified
clayed.
dirt, yeah. I don't know
Yeah.
how they did it, but
yeah, it's fun. It will be fun.
Nobody knew about it until
I don't know how.
Oh, the jumps?
Yeah.
Is that Meldrum?
No, it's on the
Yeah, as soon as they
peninsula
start
cove.
crawling, that's it.
Oh, really? I'm not surprised.
Big trouble.
I am. I
Evening
didn't know
game?
about
Oh,
it.
hey,
What's
see it?
going on out there, Tony?
Well,
BMX.
yes, I remember
BMX.
those days. I'm almost going to be a grandpa. Well,
It's
not
out there, nobody knew
They're not
about it.
Boy, those are pretty well established.
Getting there.
I do. Well,
Well, but
they're
you know,
getting pretty
for
serious,
years
you
I've
know?
driven past the
So we're-
road access there,
Thinking there
and
might be,
you know, and especially that little spot right there,
Swing bells one of
like
these
when you
days.
come down Firestone Alley,
Straight across.
you know, the logs and boulders, and they just keep
Oh, hell yeah.
pushing the trail a little further out and around to go up and over, and this is like, you know,
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun.
trucks going up and over and four-wheeling and spinning around out there when it gets all muddy, and you know, it's like just throw cow trips out there, and then when they have to buy $4,000 worth of tires every time, they might get the message.
Us and want us to buy them for them.
So you get iron tree thorns, and then it's like nature. Sorry,
Is Denise coming?
she's always running late.
Yeah.
So.
I have not heard that she is not, but
So she's on schedule.
She's not off schedule.
Gotcha.
I will leave that to you guys to discuss.
Are we?
I think we can.
Are we ready to
started.
start?
I believe so.
Okay. Planning Commission meeting is called to order. First item, see, public comment on items not listed on an agenda. Does anyone have any public comment? Seeing none. The next item is adoption of the Planning Commission meeting minutes for June 13th, 2011. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those meeting minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
Commissioner Broder,
Aye.
Commissioner Kidwell,
Aye.
Commissioner Hess,
Aye.
Commissioner May,
Aye.
Commissioner King.
Aye.
Minutes are approved.
And I vote aye because I did read them.
Makes it a good time.
Yep.
The next item on our agenda is the Water Master Plan L10-02.
Good evening, Planning Commission. At the last meeting, we heard a presentation for the Water Distribution System Master Plan update, and I'm here to present the staff report and findings to you all. Quick overview of what this plan does. This is a facilities master plan pursuant to Goal 11 of the statewide planning goals, which is Oregon Administrative Rule 660-011-00051. The Water Master Plan is one of several facilities plans needed to support the land use designations in the city's comprehensive plan for the urban growth boundary. It identifies existing water system deficiencies and required improvements, analyzes existing and future water demands, and develops a capital improvement program to meet those needs. To date, the plan update public involvement process has involved the following items. We have a public hearing process. We have published a notice of this hearing process in Clackamas Review. We've provided notice of the proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan to the Department of Land Conservation and Development. We've mailed the notice to the Citizen Involvement Committee and neighborhood associations, and the applicant, Public Works, has met with the Citizen Involvement Committee. We also have a website for the updated plan. And to date, there has been one work session with the City Commission. There are also some upcoming public meetings planned. The current schedule calls for a continuance of the City Commission public hearing to November 2nd, 2011, and that date may need to be continued to allow for some of these meetings that are going to take place to discuss the water master plan and the rate structure and those sorts of things. We have a public open house set for Wednesday, November 30th, and a second Citizen Involvement Council meeting on Monday, December 5th, followed by a City Commission work session on Tuesday, December the 13th. So when the comprehensive plan is updated, there are several things that need to be considered pursuant to the introduction to our comprehensive plan. Generally, what they are how the plan is implemented and the process, the adequacy of the plan to guide land use actions, so for example, zone changes, site planning, future subdivisions, and those sorts of developments, including an examination of trends. Whether the plan still reflects the community's needs, desires, attitudes, and conditions, and this includes changing demographic patterns and economics. And finally, the addition of updated factual information, including that made available to the city by regional, state, and federal government agencies. And in the staff report, you'll see findings about that information that's been updated as it is applicable. The overview of the Water Master Plan, we currently have a service area within the existing urban growth boundary of 4,134 acres. The plan is to address existing and future system needs through the year 2030, and within the plan is a recommended capital improvement plan which includes an analysis of the existing system improvements needed, future system improvements, and renewal and replacement improvements. The existing system improvements are generally recommended to improve fire flow to existing customers. Specifically, the recommendations involve construction of new pressure release station, which is at Telford Road, to a 6-inch pressure release valve station for the upper pressure zone at Telford Road to address fire flow deficiencies at Center Street and Sunset Street in the intermediate pressure zone, and pipeline improvements of approximately 8,900 linear feet, ranging from 6 inches to 16 inches in diameter. Storage facilities consisting of construction of a 2 million gallon storage reservoir at the 620-foot elevation contour to serve the Fairway Downs pressure zone and the upper pressure zone. Construction of a 3 million gallon storage reservoir along Holly Lane to serve the lower Park Place pressure zone, and a 1 million gallon storage reservoir at the existing Barlow Crest storage reservoir site. And this is the remainder of the build-out. Emergency storage requirement will be met from the Mountain View Reservoir number 2, and that reservoir is shown on your plans in figure ES2, but not currently included in the CIP. And additional storage will only be required when Clackamas River water facilities are incorporated into the city. Some additional pressure release valve stations near Livesey Road are needed to increase fire flow supply and to the remainder of the Park Place UGB area, and actually the existing Park Place area, and pump station at the Barlow Crest area, including 2 additional 500 gallon per minute booster pumps in the event that the current Barlow Crest customers come to be served by Oregon City. pipelines, including installation of approximately 78,000 linear feet of proposed pipelines ranging from 6 inches to 16 inches in diameter. And finally, we have renewal and replacement improvements anticipated for the system. Station number 2 replacement pressure relief valve, and station number 15 replacement pressure relief valve. Pipeline installation is estimated to be 40,000 linear feet of proposed pipelines ranging from 4 inches to 10 inches in diameter. Briefly, we're going to discuss how future water demand is determined. We're not going to go into a great amount of detail, but if you have questions about this, I will defer to Walt Meyer, who is here. The existing water consumption data is overlaid with land use data to determine actual water use for different types of land use. The existing demand uses 2008 data. And water demand for each type of land use was then applied for the entire city and the urban growth boundary to determine the build-out water demand. That includes both the additional water demand for the urban growth boundary and demand associated with vacant land within the existing city limits. This is based on a normalized demand which accounts for the higher demand years when there's more irrigation, and in this instance it was the year 2006. Thus, the existing base from which the build-out demand is projected is an average annual demand of about 4.2 million gallons per day, or 60% of the build-out demand. And based on this analysis, the average annual demand at build-out is estimated at 7.01 million gallons per day. And then when they use peaking factors to figure out maximum day demand, that came to 16.15 million gallons per day, and with a peak hour demand of 31.6 million gallons per day. In addition to that, the pipes are sized to handle fire flow into the urban growth boundary, which are going to be sized to provide a certain pressure regardless of the various types of land uses that are anticipated in those areas. The more generalized safety flow pressures required to meet fire code. This is a graphic showing the build-out water demand, showing that the existing and build-out is not quite, the build-out water demand is not quite double. It's actually about 30 to 40% over the existing. In the staff report, we have presented findings showing consistency with the following statewide planning goals. And those are based on the Oregon City's adopted comprehensive plan goals and policies that are applicable to the Water Master Plan. Goal 1, public involvement, is a critical goal. We have had various meetings up to the present date, and we plan to have more meetings to get the word out to the public. With respect to land use, I've included findings talking about how facilities within the city limit would be reviewed at the time that they are proposed to come online. Public infrastructure facilities that are part of a development, such as a subdivision, if they're in existing right-of-way, are going to be used, like pipes, are going to be reviewed as part of that development. If we're proposing a facility on outside of the right-of-way, that's going to require a conditional use permit and a site plan review in most cases. And then, of course, you will have overlay district regulations that it would also apply depending on where that facility is located. So if it's in the natural resource overlay district or the geologic hazard overlay district, the historic overlay district, floodplain overlay district, and any other of our overlay districts, the Willamette Greenway, then there would be an applicable review at the time that conditional use or site plan review occurs. It's when the exact location of those facilities is known. We've included findings for Goal 6, Goal 7, having to do with air, water, and land resources and natural hazards. The plan does include a seismic analysis. In general, they're going to try to locate future facilities in the least impacted areas and design them to withstand any seismic hazards that may be present. And with respect to the geologic hazard overlay zone, which is a buffer review overlay zone of anywhere from 50 feet to 200 feet from either an ancient landslide or the toe or crest of a 25% or more slope, then some of these facilities are going to be reviewed according to that overlay district and the standards within that part of the code. As far as economic development, obviously we cannot have economic development in our urban growth boundary and annexations if we can't serve that area with water. So in order to support the various comprehensive plan designations, whether they be industrial, commercial, residential, the Water Master Plan is a prerequisite for economic development of our city and our urban growth boundary. And as I've mentioned, if these fire flows and the various land use demand factors that are used to analyze the water demand are based on user types that we have records of. So single-family residential, multi-family residential, mixed-use development, all of those residential land uses are calculated and projected out to the urban growth boundary. So that is supportive of our housing goals. And the main goal for the update of this Water Master Plan that we need is our public facilities goals. It requires that our water, sewer, and stormwater master plans all be kept up to date. And as new information becomes available, that we incorporate that new technical information into our Water Master Plan. So we've made extensive findings in the staff report for compliance with Goal 11. And finally, energy conservation is a key goal. The Water Master Plan has analyzed the quality and condition of our existing system and given us estimates for what it's going to take to renew and replace the system as we project it out to 2030. And it's critical to update that needed facility if we're going to have a sustainable and clean and water supply. We also have included some findings in the staff report for water conservation, and I'll talk briefly about those. So just summarizing that we found that the Water Master Plan is consistent with those statewide planning goals and comprehensive planning goals and relevant policies. With respect to water conservation, we had a question about this last week. As part of the South Fork Water Board, Oregon City and West Linn have furthered water conservation and efficient water use through a regional program which consists of public education and incentives to promote and implement water conservation by the end user. And that is online accessible at the website addressed above. The Water Master Plan also looks at leakage and unaccounted for water within the system and makes recommendations as how to shore up and account for some of that unaccounted for water. The variety of ways in which the water is not accounted for, including leaks, unauthorized use of hydrants, and various other things. So staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the Water Distribution System Master Plan, which is included as Exhibit 1 of your staff report, as an ancillary document to the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan to the City Commission for their consideration at the November 2nd, 2011 public hearing. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
How many water districts are there in the city of Oregon City? About.
Well, I think we have just the city and Clackamas River Water, and then South Fork Water Board is
Is the Claremont Water District still?
No, that's part of
Okay.
that took CRW took that over.
Yeah.
Well, and we're
There's
slowly taking it over.
And there's some old references in various documents to the Park Place Water District, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's part of CRW as well.
Are there any other questions?
I just wanted to clarify that
Sorry.
November City Commission meeting, when we go there, we're going to ask to continue it because we felt like we needed to prepare for that with with public meetings. And actually, we appreciated the comments we received from the Planning Commission at your last meeting. So we're going back to the CIC at their December meeting in preparation for the City Commission so that those folks, if they have concerns, can come to the City Commission public hearings. We also have a citywide public meeting, and it's November 21st, a Monday night.
Okay, and I noticed that we have the Planning Commission meeting, and then we have CIC, and then another public entity, and then City Council. Is that the order that
Yes,
this is going to
it's
get reviewed?
CIC, the public citywide meeting is November 21st. CIC is December 5th, Monday night.
Okay.
And then we were going to hold a work session with the City Commission at their regular work
It's a work
session
se- okay,
in
work session.
December. And we wanted to invite the Planning Commission to come if you were interested in, talking to them or sharing anything or whatever. So, because this is the kind of a document that you might be interested in having some discourse with the
Well,
City Commission.
Charles,
over.
I guess my question was the same as Paul's. It seems to me that
You changed the wrong one.
the order is a little bit different, and we should have come before.
After.
Well, I'm talking about City Commission.
Oh, sorry.
I'm thinking that the public involvement parts of
No,
this
next one.
November 21st.
should be,
There you go.
Before the Planning Commission.
yes, they should happen before the
Yeah.
Planning Commission makes their final recommendation, because I think it would be valuable for us to know some of that information that is coming out of that, and things may change, and so I guess I'm just a little bit uneasy about the process.
Well, we're kind of anxious to get to the City Commission because there's a lot of water issues that are coming up in front of us. But we are happy to, we're not in any way wanting to make anybody. We want to make sure everyone's very comfortable with the process and the document.
Are there other questions or comments from the commissioners? Damon?
Yeah, at the last meeting I made the comment about annexation and assumption of water rights from annexed properties. I didn't see that in any of this, so it seems to me that it fits under goals 6, 7, and 11. We're trying to protect water and our resources and make sure that there's water available for our facilities. So I kind of jotted down a recommendation that I'd like to throw in front of the commission, see if they're interested in adopting it as an additional recommendation, or at least something that can then be discussed at these other public meetings with the other citizens. So if I have your indulgence, I'll read the recommendation, and I guess I should let the attorney look at it, but yeah. So, and the recommendation is that all voluntary and public safety annexations include a requirement to transfer any water rights on the annexed property to the city. I knew you were going to love that one.
Yeah.
It's a little loaded.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, that's.
Well, under the voluntary, they just don't have to bother to annex. If you don't want to sign over your water rights, sorry, you're not going to let you annex. Under the public safety, if we're concerned about the groundwater because we're drawing from the aquifer, then it's our duty to maintain, if their septic's gone bad and they're contaminating the groundwater, isn't that a concern of ours?
I do need to look at the calendar.
It may well be a concern, but whether or not in this specific situation, in this specific situation, it may be that it may be either the nexus may not be there because perhaps you've got a perched groundwater table where you've got the septic systems interfering with one level, but the well goes much deeper to get that water, or they're getting surface water and we're concerned about the groundwater. So there may be, but not necessarily. And more generally, depending on the value of those rights, it may be disproportional, and you'll have a violation of the Dolan case. And so I guess before you make that recommendation, I'd want to get a chance to really look at it. I haven't heard of that type of situation, and it
Well,
just
I will preface that it isn't just off the top of my head. I did, when I was with South Fork, I started to do this and spoke with the then South Fork attorney and did get some language. So it is done, and so it's not like it's a new thing. We're not breaking new ground with this.
and I've dealt with the South Fork City Attorney, and we've had our differences of opinions over the years, and so she may well have one opinion, and I have another on
Right.
whether that's doable.
I would really be interested in having that explored a little further, because the more I thought about it after our last meeting, I thought you had a very good point. And I also thought about Dolan as well, and then I thought, well, we need to know the answer. So I am glad that you brought it up.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the ability to, in the winter months when the stream's flowing heavy, being able to recharge an aquifer. So in the summer months, and the fact that we don't have any wells. So if something were to impact, South Fork's ability to get us water, or, then we've got what's in our reservoirs. And granted, there's exchange agreements, but if I was going to sabotage things, a couple of transfer stations and things change really fast. So being able, like West Lynn has the ability to pump out of their own wells, at least while they're dealing with austerity measures. We don't have that backup, and it just seems prudent for us to have that backup. And as we move out deeper and deeper into farmland, there's a lot of wells out there that are already in existence. And yeah, it might be a taking, but especially I would think under a voluntary annexation, it's just, you want to annex.
Kind of like a police fee?
Yeah, I would want to look at the liability associated. First of all, I'd want to know what the health of all those aquifers are, and then I'd want to look at the city's liability and exposure. If we were to draw from those aquifers, if one of those were to go bad, and I just wanted to know what the liability would be for its citizens if we were going to take any.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, I know CRW is
Yeah.
drawing out of one right now, 1 million gallons a day.
Maybe that's not an issue, but
And the feasibility. I'd like to know the feasibility of it as well.
I think I would too.
And I don't think the voluntary necessarily gets around the Nolan-Dolan issues for a variety of different reasons. And I think the quote, I think Commissioner Tom Lemons used to love the quote, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. And
And I
to
want
require,
to fight now when it's not
Yeah.
when it's not a critical public safety issue. I mean, the South Fork just went through a fight, in fact, that's still in the courts over issues that should have been settled 50 years ago, but nobody cared. We got 50 years of water. Who cares? Well, 50
Yeah.
years went by, and now people care.
Yeah.
Nobody cares right now about groundwater in Oregon City. I want to be the guy that cares while we have time to deal with it, and we're not, oh my God, in it in 20 years. So that's what comprehensive and foresightful planning documents are supposed to be about. So.
Well, I think it's worth.
Well, I guess my
checking.
question for the city attorney is how that jives with the basic land rights issue.
In 25 words or less.
and
Whose opinion?
yeah, I mean, my initial reaction is not particularly that I think there'd be some real problems. However, as I said, we haven't looked specifically at the idea of requiring, giving up of property rights as part of annexation. So, could there be a way around it? My thought is it's unlikely, but it's. We can look at it further if you want us to.
I'd just say that I would have a real hard time supporting that resolution.
Would you support the attorney looking into the language and feasibility of it?
I think that'd be fine.
Okay.
That's what I would
We have to
support,
look into
that
it.
we do that. I mean, we can make our decision at that particular time.
Any other questions for
There you
Pete?
Yeah, I think that
I'll give you this language.
the, on your staff report under Goal 1, I I guess I would recommend that it be substantially strengthened, because you're talking about all these other meetings that you have showing up here on the screen, and I think that would lead give a lot more credibility to the fact that even though some of these meetings have not happened, this is what's scheduled. Here's our public involvement plan that we have, and it would make, because it's kind of skimpy right now. It just says, yeah, we had this meeting and we had that meeting, but it really doesn't give any. It really doesn't give. There's no meat there, in terms of that.
Although there will be more meat after these meetings occur.
I agree. And I was just looking at my calendar because, heaven forbid, I am going to suggest that I don't feel comfortable making a recommendation to the City Commission on some of the stuff of the master plan that for instance, the financing plan, I don't have enough information about that. And I know that they're going to talk about it. And I'm kind of wondering if there is an immediate hurry to get our meeting done today, because it seems to me we could fit a meeting in on December the 12th. They'd have their work session on the 13th. They could have a public hearing on the 14th. And the public involvement part would have happened. We would be able to have a better picture of all of this. And I could truly feel comfortable with saying, yes, we know everything that we need to know. And it just seems like the public open house should have happened before our meeting. The Citizen Involvement Committee did meet, but they're having a second meeting. It should happen before we meet again to make a final recommendation on this. I just think that the timing is off.
I agree with you, Denise. I think it would make a lot of sense if the public involvement opportunities happened before we made a decision.
Well, it makes it a lot cleaner.
It does.
Whether or not we would change our mind.
No, and we may not.
But it does make things
A lot cleaner.
And I, following on what Denise said, based on what I heard the last time, I'm not real clear on exactly what the options are for the financing, but my recollection is that there was not one of the scenarios that demonstrated that the rate rollback could occur and still meet the continuing obligations, not including the CIP, but the continuing obligations to deliver the operations for the system. And my personal opinion is that's a non-starter. If you don't have an option on the table that meets the obligation for the city for providing water to its citizens and comply with the ordinance that's in place, you're somewhat holding the citizens hostage. So it seems like you must have one scenario that at least does that.
And I think, I think planning staff felt that you can adopt your water master plan, which is your physical infrastructure plan, and then have a separate discussion about the rate structure and the necessary amendments to the charter plan. But I could certainly see where you're uncomfortable moving the plan forward until that discussion has occurred at the city commission level.
That's the reason I asked last week if we were approving the scenarios for the rate structure. And you said that we were.
Yeah. And
there is a recommendation within Chapter 9 for a scenario.
And we're going to get asked. I mean, even though we're not qualified.
So I personally, after reflecting on what the presentation made last week, would not be prepared to support the master plan without one scenario that showed that the rollback would meet the obligations of the city to provide water to the citizens and maintain the system absent the CIP.
I'm pretty much okay with all of the chapters, so until we get down to 8 and 9, and there's a little bit of 7 that I'm apprehensive about, only from the standpoint that I guess my question that I asked last time was the growth projections. I know that we use a lot of the numbers from Metro, but I guess my gut feeling is kind of telling me that although we have a 2035 plan for our regional area, that the projections are not what we once thought they were 5 years ago. And so I'm trying to reconcile a little slower growth rate with the aggressiveness of this plan to really ramp up, and you showed that on that last slide where it was like this, and that one was way up there, and I went, okay, well, how is that working? You know, we're not getting a lot of building permits right now for house. I'm not saying we're completely slow it down, but maybe there should be some, you know, there's the slow growth CIP, there's sort of the middle growth CIP, and then there's what happens if you know, all of a sudden everything is great, the banks work, Greece doesn't default, and we just go crazy, you know, and obviously there's some in-betweens there somewhere. But I didn't really see that in here. I just kind of saw one scenario that was projecting, you know, we're going to go out to infinity and beyond.
Well, I'll let the
experts?
Walt talk to you about that, but my recollection from the text, and I don't have it in front of me, is that there is a 1.5% population projection from the metro base, and then a 3%. And the 3% is the one that came closest to the land use scenario projection as well, and so those numbers were fairly close, around 7 million gallons per day. But perhaps Walt could talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think what's hard here is that this master plan is for the UGB. It's not saying when it's going to happen, and so it's almost like we'd have to decide which parts of the UGB aren't going to develop to do. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm not sure if we can actually do that. And Bill, I thought in talking to Carrie there was something that we can't start changing the metro numbers.
Well, what the city attorney, Carrie Richter, had said was we have an obligation to plan for the land use designations within our comprehensive plan as adopted.
Yeah, I get that.
And that includes providing adequate fire flow. So some of those are overriding factors.
Well, and this is the plan, whether it happens in 2015, 2025,
Right.
5216. I mean, it's what we need to do in order to make that development occur, and especially the infrastructure replacement issues are ones that doesn't matter how much. You know, if we could have zero growth, and we still got to replace broken pipes and pump stations that don't work. So, I mean, I understand your concern, but I think that just comes down to a caveat of, at full build-out, this is what we need, and this is the plan that, you know, gets us there. And that's just the statement that needs to be made. You can take dates out of it completely.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that needs to be more clearly articulated in the findings that we're going to adopt at some point in time, so that it is clear. Because I do understand that what I was just waiting for was for you to say that again, so it was on the record again.
I would concur with Denise in the sense that I didn't see, you know, there's a lot of dates tied to this. I didn't see that there was a trigger for the CIP based on the actual growth as opposed to a timeline. I understand what Damon's talking about, that there is the ongoing replacement and maintenance that's necessary, but that's a separate issue from the new growth build-out.
But we are being asked, I mean, the CIP is a part of this, as you
Yes.
clearly articulated earlier, and we're making a recommendation that, yes, we think all of this is meeting the standards, and it meets the criteria, and it meets all the standards, and we can make specific findings. And I think what I'm hearing is that we all have a little bit of discomfort about some different parts that we would like to have a little more time.
And I do think allowing the public involvement phase of this process to go forward before we make a determination allows that to happen in a more timely
Manner.
fashion.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
Are there any other questions or comments for Pete?
So just so I know what my marching orders are, I think we need what you've asked for is a clear understanding of which parts of the CIP would be built with development, and which parts would not.
I mean, that's.
Yeah.
I think it's already laid out, and you can't say, well, we're going to build the Holly Lane Reservoir before we build the Barlow Crest Reservoir, because if development happens at Barlow Crest, you're going to build that one before you build the Holly Lane one. So, you know, from what I saw in the document, repair and replace is fairly well identified, and growth items are kind of identified as and the rest. But if they would prefer them be different colors or in a little box or whatever, that's fine. But I didn't have any difficulty figuring out what was what. But then I'm not everybody, so I apologize if I seem haughty about that.
Walt, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think you're dead on. The CIP has three fundamental elements to it. One is the minor projects necessary to upgrade the existing system to meet some fire flow deficiencies, and that's something that needs to happen relatively soon. And it's one of the first things in the CIP. Is it's completely unrelated to build out in the UGB. The second piece of it is replacement, and that's simply to replace lines that are deteriorated that need to be replaced. And I talked to you about last time about the need to have a certain base level of replacement so that we keep the system sustainable. And the third piece is to extend the system out in the UGB. The rate scenarios I presented last week don't address that last one. That happens when it happens, and it's funded primarily from by development and by system development charges. It's not part of the CIP that's in the rate scenarios in this plan. Now, there is a discussion in the plan that if you were to grow at an average rate of 3%, then essentially in about 20 years, plus or minus, you'd be essentially at build-out based upon that level of growth. But we don't know how fast it's going to be. We could go on another 10 years at no growth. We don't know. But that's the CIP, and the rate scenarios presented are based upon the existing system improvements and replacement, period. And we did, in fact, identify a couple scenarios of a rate rollback, both of which are going to require significant cuts in the existing O&M costs, because there's zero money available for capital improvements. There's no money available for any capital improvements because the amount of revenue that will be generated from the rate rollback will be less than current expenditures. And so how much you roll back will be the question mark, and where you roll it back, whether it be and I remember I mentioned too that a significant percentage of your expenditures could simply go to buy the water, the treated water from the South Fork Water Board, and so the rest of it will have to come from cuts in existing operations. And that's the discussion that the City Commission is going to have in terms of, if we want to pursue that as a scenario, where would those cuts take place? And that's, it's not for me to call. I mean, I can simply point out, here's the level of expenditures we have, here's what you expend the money for, here's how much revenue you have, and here's a shortfall based upon which assumptions you make on the rollback.
Okay. And actually, the City Commission might look at other scenarios as they move along. We have to put something down so that we can start the conversation about what level of service do you want your water system to have, and what rate structure is needed to support that level of service. So we see the master plan as being the first just overall document showing our needs, and then we use that to open up the whole discussion about what
How do we pay
funding
for our
scenario are you really going to be able to want, and what's palatable to our community.
And the way the charter is written, in the end, the citizens of Oregon City can have the final say on that. Mm-hmm. Because whatever we do, it's going to take a vote of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was some discussion about constructing water lines in the UGB. I guess my first question is, does the city have an urban services boundary where services could be between the UGB and the city boundary where services can feasibly be provided?
No.
We don't have one?
No.
Okay. Some jurisdictions do, some don't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then so you're planning on building water systems out in that area, and then there are obviously existing water systems that Clackamas County has approved, or in some of the urbanized areas in the UGB. Is that correct?
Clackamas
Are there
River
very
Water
many?
has some pipelines in our UGB.
Yeah. So I was just wondering if there was going to be any interties or any use of those water systems, and if there is any changes you're proposing to the county UGMA to deal with all that?
I think that anytime there's a extension of service or a discussion of extension of service, what we've communicated to the Clackamas River Water folks is that at that time it's appropriate to have a dialogue as to in some cases they may have a pipeline in the street, but they need that pipeline to provide service beyond, and so they can't just give it to us because they need it. And so there has to be a dialogue at that. How can the two entities now provide service most effectively so that they maintain the viability of their water distribution system, and Oregon City and the two of them can both benefit from as extension of services provided. So that's simply a dialogue that's going to have to take place, and it's going to be very, very specific to the condition that's being looked at.
Well, and I guess my concern would be the type of water system that the city's going to end up inheriting. If a lot of those water systems are old out there, and they're going to need replacement. So that I would think that you'd want to put something like that, at least have some sort of transfer of jurisdiction of, if you annex, maybe you transfer the property or the territory into the city, and then maybe you have a transfer of maintenance jurisdiction kind of staggered after that, until which time the county has improved that system, and then, or whatever entity, South Fork or whatever, and then they give it over to us instead of
And in the past,
having us inherit it.
we've had
that
intergovernmental
system.
agreements.
Yeah.
We have intergovernmental agreements with Clackamas River Water, and that's how we've handled a lot of the Central Point Road transfers, South End Road transfers,
Barlow
other.
Crest.
Yeah.
Right.
And then are there, and then on another vein, are there very many connections outside the city boundary, in the urban growth boundary with city water?
We only have a few, and they're
Just
on
a few?
Limesey Road.
It's kind of
That's
emergency
it.
type things.
Yeah,
Okay.
we typically do not provide direct water service outside the UGB, but for some reason we have them on Limesey Road, and we've always have. So
Yeah.
Well, that was part of the
They
Park
came in
Place
with Park Place.
annexation.
Do you guys require any kind of contract for annexation as part of providing those services, so that they're on the hook to annex at some point when they're ready?
Those are so old, I
Okay.
have no idea.
They were
All right.
way before the health hazard
Yeah.
annexation.
And now occasionally we do, like we've had to provide a couple of sewer services where you've got a health problem with
Yeah.
and they're so close they might as well just hook up. But
Right.
then we do have agreements with them that if there's an we have the sort of the hammer on the annexation.
Great.
And those are very few. I mean, I think we have a
Yeah, I know
handful.
they come up really
Right.
not very often, but
Based on the existence of these kinds of agreements, the last few annexations that we've looked at have had a tax lot by tax lot analysis of what would stay in CRW and what would connect to city water upon approval of the annexation.
okay. That gets confusing sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last couple of, they're basically saturation agreements that when a certain amount of the zone is now annexed in, then it becomes our jurisdiction. Up until then, it's their jurisdiction.
Yeah. I just want to be careful of any public service, really. Sewers, roadways, especially. Sometimes you end up having a D-grade roadway that you annex into the city, and then those new citizens are demanding roadway improvements.
That's why we don't own Beaver Creek Road
We
as
can't
far
get
out
them.
as we.
Hey, Nancy's too smart for that. She's not.
I
City's
don't
not
doubt it.
taking
Yeah.
those roads.
Are there any other questions for Pete?
Nope.
Yeah.
We also have the previous presentation if you need to have any detailed questions about that.
Could you put
Next
that
meeting.
citizen involvement schedule up there again? Because
Should we get that right?
did it say where the 21st meeting is going to be? Is it going to be
Right
here?
here.
Here?
Yeah, the
Right
city.
here on our stage?
They'll
Okay.
be here.
All right.
And will not be an open house, because I think this kind of information is very difficult to convey in an
No
open house
kidding.
setting. It'll be a presentation,
So time,
7 p.m.
1 p.m. And then the CIC meets at 7?
It's December 5th, 7
7?
o'clock here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the 21st.
Yeah, I don't think it's a Wednesday. Is it 21st to a Wednesday?
The 21st is a Monday.
Monday.
Yeah.
Got the date changed, but not the day.
Drat. All right, well, I
And-
think what
and-
we can do is put these dates up on the website as well.
So it's
Yeah.
a given that the city commission hearing will be continued.
Yeah, we were going to continue it to January, but I want to hear a little bit more clearly
Well,
where
I
the
think our
planning commission wants to
recommendation
go.
is that we continue this until the
December.
December 12th.
Yeah, that's what I was
And then
recommending.
we'll
That
get
looks
the
like it
input.
would meet.
It would still,
Yeah, then we'd get all the public input from those meetings, and then we can act at that point.
You're okay meeting before the work session with the city commission?
Yeah. We'd be doing the same thing we'd be doing if we acted today.
But at least have a
Would
couple
be-
levels of public involvement
Yeah.
and
under our belt.
right, and that strengthens those findings of fact in the staff report.
Are you interested in attending the city commission work session on the 13th?
I'll be there whether it's official or not, because I'm going to be screaming about water rights.
Who else
so
wants another night meeting?
I do.
I have no life.
What life?
I don't know. I can't answer
So-
that.
Well, we'll extend an invitation. We'll send you an email.
Do we need to make a motion to continue?
I think before, yes, we do.
Yes.
But I'd also like to kind of get some clarity. I heard a couple questions out there, but I just want to make sure we understand what you expect us to bring back to you. So there was the question about water rights
Yep.
upon annexation, takings, nexus.
Yep.
There was some discussion about
Charles had a question about the CIP.
All the options showing for the CIP.
Yeah, not just the CIP, but the whole thing related to the rate rollback and whether or not the city will continue to meet their obligation to deliver water
it's key.
with the rollback as it stands right now, which is mandated by the city ordinance.
I thought that was the first one, which was rolls back 3% growth from the date of the rollback. This is what the money would be, and then it showed, operating costs and income.
Well, that's my concern, is that the way it was presented is that there will be a shortfall.
Right.
I guess this gets into the difficulty of staff making policy decisions about what we're going to cut in order to provide the service. Yeah, I don't know how you feel about coming up with a actual scenario that
Well, I think
spells out how it's met with the rollback.
Well, possibly one thing that could be done for that would be under the expenses bar that doesn't meet income is shade this section for mandatory payment to South Fork, and then just
Well, that's
offer
exactly what we
just-
talked about last time,
Right.
that if that bar that represented the total expenses were broken down so that it could be seen what things were pushing the expenses beyond
Yeah.
the
Available revenue.
the mandated rate.
Rate.
Yeah.
So
and,
not-
and so what I was going to say is you have the bill to from South Fork, the just operating the pump station, no replacement, just the day-to-day operations cost, and then then the maintenance side, the operations, and then the maintenance side, and see where that look, we'll do zero maintenance and we'll still be $100,000 in the red.
But to be clear, you're not asking, or are you asking for assumptions in those line items, or just line items identified as what's discretionary and what's required?
That's what I'm.
Well, I guess from my
yeah, there's
point,
no assumptions.
There's
in
not a
that.
lot of discretionary
my point of view
funding
is
in the water
that
department.
when the bond was passed in, was it 94?
Yeah.
Prior to that, the city was delivering water services and maintaining a system. So if you were to roll back your service level to the level prior to the bond being passed and account for your 3% annual rate increases over that period of time, where does that put you? I guess that's my question. Is because on the surface, it sounds to me that the rate of maintaining the system has increased faster than that 3% growth would
rate.
allow. And once the bond is paid for, and that's off the table, logic would say, well, if you're providing the same service you provided prior to the bond being passed, you should be able to meet the expenses for that system. So if that's not the case, it seems to me that there ought to be an illustration of why that is.
And I think probably when they increased the water rates, I believe it was 160%. Anybody?
It was like 60, it was a 65% increase
Yes,
in rate.
yes. So,
Yeah, that was-
65, that probably wasn't
no,
just for the
almost
borrowing.
$1.
It probably was because our service level was, and that was, again, it was before our time, but I think we can,
Yeah,
I think we can make an attempt to show what we're spending the money on in that expenditure column, and we'll see how that, I'll see what I can do with that. I do think it's a good illustration. I think you're making
from
a
a
very good
ratepayer's
point.
point of view, I would think, just logic would say, it's like I've paid off my car that I bought or my house, and now my budget should go back to where it was before I had that payment. So if now I'm not meeting my budget without that payment, I'm wondering, why is that the case?
Well, and I think what I recollect is we weren't making our budget in '94 either.
Well,
and so having a $94 column, this is where we were in '94 before we passed it, where we were already expenses over income.
That would be a great point to make. If the city was already subsidizing the water and the maintenance of the system prior to '94, maybe that's a point to make, is that we were not meeting expenses before that.
Well, Charles, the one thing that you forgot to add in your scenario about the car, which I love because people can get that, is although you were making your payments for your car and you paid it off, you still have maintenance expenses whether the car is paid off or not. So somewhere there needs to be that little column for
Right.
you have those maintenance expenses, whether you have the bond paid off or not. They're still, I mean, they're going to be maybe not the same, but they will either be less because, you've been maintaining it and running it more efficiently, or you've not been maintaining it all, and now all of a sudden, you've got a big maintenance budget.
Right, and I guess just on a personal
because there's more demand.
on a personal level, I would liken it to that if I had a salary that I was getting for my regular compensation, and my employer was kind enough to give me a bonus for several years, and then the economy went south, and he said, no more bonuses. If I've changed my lifestyle to expect that bonus, and now I've got a shortfall because the bonus isn't there, that's a problem. And, I think that's probably a comparable situation here.
You mean the
Sorry, I didn't
CEO
see it.
scenario where they anticipate their golden parachute, so they go ahead and buy the $20 billion house?
Yeah, except for I think here we're not talking about billions.
Yeah, I know.
Hopefully not.
So then
I
there
haven't
was
seen it.
also, so Nancy, is that enough? You kind of got an idea of what they're looking for?
Well, what I heard was that we want to add a paragraph that clarifies
Generally, they try.
Okay.
The
I haven't put that
timeline.
on my calendar, so.
the uncertainty of a timeline for growth. Okay. And then Pete would clarify the findings relative to the dates. Those are two associated things. We want to look into the legal aspects of water rights being turned over to the city upon annexation. And then we want to illustrate better what the expenditures column covers and what might not be covered if we roll the rates back. And maybe, it's a little, I'm hoping that the information's available for back in 91, 92, 93, 94, to see if I can do any actual looking
Just
back. and
ask
see,
David. He was
were
here.
we-
He'll probably remember it.
were we really, how much were we underfunded in 94? So, that might be a little tricky, but I do think, I think that those are the kinds of details that the public is going to want to know. I mean, if you're asking the question, somebody else is going to ask.
Right, and I'm just kind of saying, from when you get to these public involvement meetings, I can almost guarantee those questions are going to come up,
Yeah.
and probably in a more emotional way.
Yeah, could be.
So, Tony, I have a logistics question. So if we continue this and we don't make a decision on this, how would the city commission be holding a public hearing on it if they don't have a recommendation from us, or am I asking a crazy question?
We just continue. We've
Public
been
hearing.
continuing about 3 or 4 of these already. Yeah.
Well,
So
this
we
is
open the
how
public
continue
record. If
on.
someone wants to speak, they can. Then we continue it to another
Okay,
date certain.
even though we're a little bit out of order?
Yeah, it happens.
Do you
that's
want
not
a
a-
motion, Mr.
Well,
Chairman?
if I can just clarify, there was another question about liability of wells and
That gets back to the water
Rights
rights
question.
Last
Yeah.
So
episode.
that
Yeah,
kind of
that was a follow-up to the water rights question. So are we
Yeah, I
taking a
think it
bad
ties
well
in
or a
Damon's
Yeah.
question.
okay. So
one with
that's-
arsenic or, you know?
Well, I think the
Well,
question
they're
is,
out there.
if
Anyways.
Damon's scenario of acquiring the water rights happens with the annexation, then is the city liable for the quality of that water?
Is that a question that you want answered?
That'd be a concern I'd have.
It
yeah.
could be. It could be.
I would like to know about the feasibility of, is it even worth doing? As
Yeah.
well? I mean, what is the level of, and that's probably maybe way more than the scope of what this master plan
mean-
really gets into. So,
Yeah,
Well-
the bigger question is how good is the groundwater out there? Is it potable? Is it
I mean, Nancy, is that something we're even anywhere prepared to look into?
Well, no, I'm not prepared to answer that, but I do know that there are many small wells that are down probably about 100, 125, 150 feet in Oregon City. Very few. There aren't very many
that's
of
hard
them
rock,
left. And those are very low production wells. If you're
Right.
talking about a well that's big enough to fill an 8-inch pipeline, that would be probably a deeper aquifer, and you do get into water quality issues in those deeper aquifers. From what I've heard, the CRW well is having troubles with their water quality. So
That's what we heard.
it's not just a easy fix. I mean, it's a complicated matter. And then meeting water quality standards and taste and odor.
Well, and
It's
for what it's
tough.
worth, I think the Clackamas River Water Providers Consortium, whatever it is, talked to John. They might have a lot of this already mapped out as far as where there's wells and what their production numbers are. Because I know they've been
You want me to
looking.
bring back all that stuff? Are you
No,
sure?
no, no. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
I have a new
you were-
project to work on.
We're going to be checking your work too.
I'm just saying that if you're like, well, we can't find the information, talk to John, because if he doesn't know who to talk to, then you're getting into this huge project. And
But in the Oregon City area, I know of one high production well, and it's not that high production, and it's CRW's. And
right,
that's-
it's 1 million gallons a day. So
and they're having troubles with it.
right.
But obviously, there'd be a huge difference in the value of a aquifer that only produces a few hundred gallons a day versus thousands or millions.
Yeah.
Are there?
So-
I should know this answer, but are there a number of? I know we have a number of river systems, and in my head I can see the map of the systems. But where the aquifers, are there more than one that underlie our area?
Well, there's the perched aquifer, and then there's one in the Troutdale Formation, and then there's probably one way deeper down in the Columbia River basalt. And it just depends where you are in Oregon City. The geology is really complex in Oregon City, and so
Yeah, and we're not
Varies.
tapping into any of those, are we?
the city.
Right, because we're getting our water from
South.
south.
So are we looking for postponing to a date certain,
Yep.
Yeah, December 12th.
December 12th?
Yeah, I would
So,
move that.
so I'm sorry, I'm still unclear.
Oh, you're still-
on the
okay.
is there a question that we need to answer concerning the aquifers?
no.
No, I was just curious.
Okay, I just want to make sure when we bring it back, we get everything you need.
No,
'cause
I think the question really is for the city
It's
attorney
takings
to
nexus.
Yeah.
clarify the water rights issue.
Okay, okay,
If it's hopefully it's simple.
okay.
It's probably going to be somewhere along the lines of probably not, but there might be something out there. It's just a real one-sentence summary.
Let's
Are we ready to entertain a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we continue the public hearing on the City of Oregon City's water master plan to December the 12th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Brown,
I
Commissioner Kidwell,
Aye.
Commissioner Espy,
Aye.
Commissioner McGrath,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
No, that was them.
Sorry, I apologize.
It was no, yes, no.
All ayes.
Motion carries.
All right, Mr. Kidwell.
Okay, so what is our communications Who's going to do that?
I was just going to bring up, as Ms. Crushar was pointing out earlier, that we did receive the request for the joint Planning Commission, City Commission work session to discuss the master plan on December 13th at 5:30 here at City Hall. So we'll follow up with an email, and then we can confirm through that process. Also, update on the Willamette Falls Blue Heron property. You've probably seen in the paper some of the work that's been going on. Metro is looking into purchasing that property, making a bid on the property. Originally, the bids were due, I believe, October 19th.
Did they extend that?
They extended it out to mid-December. So we will continue to work with Metro as well as other stakeholders in trying to put together a reasonable stakeholder group and bid on that property. So hopefully, as we get through negotiations, we can discuss a little bit more about where we're at and what we're doing on that property.
But the equipment's gone.
The equipment's been sold. That's correct. NRI is the company that bought all the equipment on the property. Looks like they're probably going to be
Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Looks like they're probably, we haven't seen the entire agreement yet, but that they are looking at about 2 years that they'll be on the property, working on it, getting the equipment, consolidating some services. You will probably see some of the tanks, which are considered equipment and were sold as part of the auction, being removed from the site, whether that be some of the water tanks. We are in quite a bit of contact with NRI. They've been very good to work with so far. We are pulling one global demolition permit for all of the tanks on the site, mostly focusing on getting an understanding of what the chemicals are that are inside them, make sure that those are disposed of properly.
Are there any contamination mitigation efforts going on there?
Not that we're aware of yet, no. It's still pretty early on, though.
Tony, I was, I don't know if somebody told me this or I read this, that some of the equipment may cause issues with the structural integrity of the building because they're integrated literally into the building. So how are they going to take that out without compromising the structures?
As I said, we've had quite a few conversations with them. I don't think anyone has a clear understanding of exactly what has to happen in every situation on the site. Mm-hmm. So we haven't had to address that yet. And I'm not sure that they know, they have not come to us and said we've got an issue with a piece of equipment holding up a building. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure where that's coming from, but they haven't come to us with that concern yet. They know that they need to come work with us before they touch any of the buildings in terms of removing walls and whatnot to get equipment out. So
what about archaeological resources that could potentially be disturbed in whatever they're doing? I mean, have they done an archaeological review that's related to that in some way?
No, they have not. I believe that would probably fall under your existing state requirements. If you're in there disturbing and you run across some type of an archaeological, you are responsible.
And there was a little thing in the paper about Tri-Cities putting a bid on, or Clackamas County putting a bid on the ponds, the equipment.
Across the river.
The facility.
The 42
across
acres
the
on the
river.
other
Yes,
side, yes.
Yes, excuse me, I couldn't even get it out.
Correct.
Right now it's about 11 o'clock, so my brain is kind of starting to be tired because it's still on East Coast time. I was in Buffalo about 10 hours ago.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad you're not involved.
The only I know the same on that as you've seen in the papers. I haven't had any conversation with Clackamas County about what their bid's going to be or whatnot, but I know that they're interested in that side, in those properties, and that the trustee has moved from have to take everything to now split it into separate on two separate schedules.
Okay, I got to be the parrot here. Water rights. I think the mill at some point had in-stream water rights on the Willamette, but I also had heard that in part of their cost savings, they sold those rights to PGE, or that PG owned them and they'd leased them to them, it would be useful to find out if there's in-stream rights there.
I think, once again, this is part of the property negotiation.
But-
We can't really talk about that right now.
Right, but I'm just saying, make sure your ears are perked up for that, because every ounce counts.
You could have showed it to us.
Any other issues to discuss?
Nope, I think that's all for tonight. Unless someone has-
How's
Motion
it
that
going
we're-
with the Natural Resources Committee?
Oh, okay. Yeah, we have an interview for 2 new applicants. So these will be the 5th and 6th applicants for the Natural Resources Committee. We haven't received any other applications, so we'll be able to start the committee with 6 members. We've scheduled. We still have to appoint these 2 applicants. So
To be interviewed and appointed?
Interviewed and
sorry.
possibly appointed.
Yeah, so there has to be some interviews and some appointments left to be done. The NRC meetings will be scheduled the 3rd Thursday of every month, 6 p.m. here at City Commission chambers. We've got some quality applicants, and looking forward to hammering out an action plan with those guys and getting the ball rolling. Let's see, the 2 that we will be interviewing on Thursday night are Bob Roth and Mr. Sinase. And Bob Roth has a lot of experience working with watershed councils and governments. And Mr. Sinase is studying environmental science at PSU and Clackamas Community College. So we'll see how those guys work out.
So, I have one more thing for you, Tony. So, speaking of natural resources committees, did we have something that we were going to have, we wanted to have at least one meeting with some group or committee this quarter? Do we have anybody set up? Do we have
Not
anybody
yet.
on deck?
No.
Who do we want to meet
Who
with?
do you want to meet with?
There you
We
go.
can line it up. Historic Review
Maybe-
Board,
yeah, maybe we
Parks.
should figure out who we want to meet with and then figure out if we can meet with them.
Are there any
I recommend we
committees?
meet with the city council sometime in December.
Like the 13th.
That's going to be very, I know, but this.
So there we go.
But you want to invite them to your meeting. You don't want to go to theirs.
Exactly.
Well, it's in neither meeting, so it's a neutral.
Neutral ground, yeah, okay, let's meet down.
No, we could line up Historic Review Board if you'd like. They can talk about the survey that's been done
yeah.
and where they're at with that.
Yeah,
Any new properties that might have got added because of that. That'd be-
I think that would be good only from the well, for many reasons, but because of the standpoint that I had made some comments to them about the consultant classifying everything either a craftsman or a bungalow, and when I took a look at the pictures, I said, no, those are not bungalows, those are not craftsmen, and we really need to change that, because we only have about 4 authentic craftsman-style homes in Oregon City, and the rest of them, I can tell you, they are not. And I think I came up with like 60 of them that they had accidentally categorized as that. That's what I'll say.
Probably ought to get to them before they put it in the SHPO database.
Exactly, and
The problem is the SHPO database.
Is it already in?
Well, no, it's
So
it's
it's
the
the
options
category.
available.
yeah. Well, these were much simpler, homes than that. That's why I was, I said, here are your examples of the craftsmen in town. You want to compare them against that, not just saying that that's the category, because when they say craftsman, they do mean that it was designed and developed by a craftsman and somebody who was recognized in that particular architectural field, not necessarily an architect, but a builder, a skilled builder. And our folks in Oregon City are the Vonderay brothers, who built a number of craftsman homes that are still standing today. So that sounds pretty groovy.
Anything else? We have a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
So moved.
Third.
Is that
Or
being,
adjourned.
is that being,
Second.
is that being haughty?